You know, if you've lived in your home for 20, maybe even 30 years, there's a good chance you've looked around recently and thought, uh-oh, does my house feel outdated now? And honestly, that thought can become very expensive for sellers because I see people spending thousands and thousands of dollars trying to modernize everything before listing, when many times the buyers are focused on completely different things. Now, yes, buyers absolutely notice when a home feels neglected or frozen in another era, but there's a huge difference between making a home feel cared for and trying to turn a 1996 Highlands Ranch house into a 2026 Sterling Ranch model home overnight. And if you're not careful, you can spend a lot of money fixing the wrong things while still missing what buyers really care about. The wrong kind of updating. One of the biggest mistakes I see sellers make with older homes is assuming they have to completely modernize everything before putting the house on the market. And that can become very expensive very quickly. Because if you're comparing your home to the brand new builds nearby, that heavily remodeled flip, or the designer kitchen that you saw online, it's easy to start thinking that the whole house suddenly needs a redo, when in reality, it may just need a refresh instead. Now, yes, buyers absolutely appreciate updated kitchens and bathrooms, but buyers are also much more practical these days with interest rates, insurance costs, HOA fees, and overall affordability pressures. A lot of the buyers are perfectly willing to accept an older home if it feels well cared for and functional for their lifestyle and in reasonably move-in ready condition. And that's very different from trying to make the whole house feel brand new, because many times sellers spend huge amounts of money updating things the buyers would end up changing anyway. Meanwhile, buyers are often reacting to whether the home feels bright and light, whether things appeared careful, whether the house feels clean and comfortable, and whether everything seems to function the way it should. That overall feeling during a showing often matters much more than whether every finish inside the home feels perfectly 2026. What buyers actually respond to. And now this is where I think sellers sometimes get surprised, because buyers are usually not walking into an older home expecting it to compete with brand new construction, especially here in the South Metro Denver suburbs, where so many of the homes were built, oh my gosh, in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, or even before. Most buyers already understand they're not walking into a brand new house, but they are trying to figure out, how much work am I walking into after I move in? And that's where sellers of older homes can sometimes get into trouble. I sold a home a while back that had been in the same family since the 1950s, and while it had been loved and cared for over the years, a lot of the finishes inside still looked very stuck in another era. So when buyers walked through the house, instead of picturing themselves living there, they started mentally building a renovation list. And once that starts happening, most buyers can become overwhelmed very quickly. Now compare that to some other homes that I've sold, where I've seen sellers didn't necessarily renovate everything, but they refreshed the home enough that buyers could emotionally settle into the space more easily. Maybe the paint felt fresher, the lighting felt brighter, the rooms felt cleaner or more open, and the systems had been maintained, and the buyers ultimately felt like they could move in first and then slowly personalize things over time. That creates a completely different emotional reaction during a show, because right now that feeling of this house feels manageable is incredibly important, especially with buyers already feeling stretched by overall affordability concerns. Your home does not have to work for everyone. And this is another place where sellers can start putting a lot of pressure on themselves, unnecessarily. Because once a home sits on the market for a little while, it's very easy to start wondering if you suddenly need to change everything. But sometimes the house simply isn't the right fit for that particular buyer. For example, I recently had an agent show one of my evergreen listings to a buyer who had 3 dogs. Now, the property sits on the side of a mountain, so there really isn't that big flat backyard or huge dog area like you'd find in a suburban neighborhood. The showing agent had even mentioned that beforehand to her client because she wasn't sure the property would work for her client's situation. But the buyer still wanted to see it anyway. And that's what happens more than sellers realize, because buyers don't walk through homes looking at them exactly the same way. One buyer may love the privacy and the mountain setting, while another buyer immediately focuses on the lack of a usable yard space. One buyer may see character, while somebody else only sees future projects. So not every buyer who walks through your home is automatically going to connect with it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the house is wrong, or the updates were wrong, or you suddenly need to put another $50,000 in renovations into it. Sometimes it simply means they weren't the right buyer for your house. Sellers of older homes usually do best when they stop trying to compete with every newer listing around them and instead focus on presenting their older home in a way that feels welcoming, cared for, and manageable for the next person walking through their door. The goal isn't perfection. I think this is the part sellers really need to hear right now. If you're living in an older home somewhere around the Denver suburbs, you do not need to turn your house into a brand new Shea model before putting it on the market. Isn't that good news? Most people simply don't have the budget or the time or the desire to completely renovate a house. They're getting ready to leave anyway. And buyers understand this. What buyers are really trying to figure out is this: does the home fit the lifestyle I envision, and is it manageable for me? Does it feel cared for, comfortable, functional for my everyday life? And can I move in without immediately drowning in a house project list? Because once buyers start feeling like, wow, I'm going to have to replace everything right away, that's when overwhelm starts creeping into the show. Especially right now when so many buyers are already stretching financially just to purchase the home in the first place. So if you're starting to think about selling an older home, the first thing I usually tell sellers is stop focusing on perfection. Instead, start walking through your home, looking for the places where buyers may struggle to fully enjoy the space because there's simply too much competing for their attention. Maybe it's a room that feels overly full of furniture, collections, or decor, to the point where the buyers stop noticing the actual size and function of the room. Or maybe it's a space that doesn't get enough natural light, so instead of feeling warm and inviting, it starts feeling a little closed off or dark during the showing. Or sometimes it's simply a home where buyers can tell the seller has lived there comfortably for a long time, but they struggle with how to picture their own lifestyles and how that would fit into the space moving forward. And a lot of this is an easy fix for most sellers. Sometimes it's as simple as fresh paint throughout the home and a nice neutral color that reflects natural light. In fact, one of my clients is doing this right now to her house before we put it on the market. Other times it might be investing in better lighting for each room to better show off all the features of that room to a buyer no matter what time of day they take a home tour. And sometimes it's a thorough cleaning from baseboards to the ceiling to clear out the dust bunnies and the cobwebs and allow the rooms to shine. And sometimes it's as simple as decluttering to show the great space in your home and allow buyers to imagine having their own stuff on display. Now, I know I said it's as simple as decluttering, and sometimes for people, if you have a lot of stuff, I know I'm one of them, it's a lot harder than it sounds. But I've got a great resource for you. It's called Declutter to Distress, Your Home Selling Guide. It's a free download for you. You'll find the link in the description below. This usually surprises sellers that buyers often respond much more strongly to these kind of smaller improvements than sellers expect. Once a house starts feeling lighter, cleaner, easier to move through, and easier to picture themselves living in, buyers relax. And when buyers relax inside a home, they stay longer. They notice the space more, and they start emotionally moving into the house instead of mentally building a to-do list. And that's usually far more important than trying to chase every decorating trend you saw online before selling. So, if you've been looking around your older home lately wondering, where do I even start? Take a breath and remember, buyers are usually not expecting perfection. What they are looking for is a home that feels like the perfect place for the next stage of their life. Hi, if we haven't met yet, I'm Peggy Dursthoff with Live Denver Suburbs, powered by HomeSmart, and I specialize in helping women over 50 make smart real estate moves without pressure and without regret. And if you're starting to think that your home may actually need a few projects before going on the market, go ahead and watch this next video first. What not to fix before selling your home. Because sometimes sellers spend money in all the wrong places. I'll walk you through which updates usually help the most and which ones may not give you much return before you move. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.